Thank you so much for staying with us this afternoon. It's Labor Day, and we're loving those people who get out and go to work. And we're also talking about relationships today, which can be a labor of love, okay? It's kind of me playing on words today, okay? I want you to meet someone, Dr. Darren Moore. He's a marriage and family counselor, expert relationship person from Mercer University. Thank you so much for being with us and taking time on Labor Day to join us.
Thank you for having me.
And we're kind of segueing from what we're doing. We're really looking forward to the Candy Burris play that's coming up at the River Center this Thursday and Friday. But she has hit on something that happens to a lot of families. She has fallen in love with someone that her mother doesn't like. Okay, and so her mother is all in her business, how she makes her money, how he's going to make his money, how he's going to take care of her. So we're talking about that sort of intrusiveness is the word that you used a little while ago. So how often is that a problem in your counseling sessions?
I actually see that very often. I think part of that is that, you know, one of the things that's important for us to realize is what's behind all of that. So for a lot of mothers in particular, there is a desire for the overall well-being of their child. And so they want what's best for their children. And so they want their children to grow, to develop, to maintain healthy relationships. They want them to be financially secure. And so although it does not always come across in the most positive way, I think as we've talked about the Candy Burris show and her experience in her play, sometimes it can come off as negative.
But let me ask you this, I'm going to back up. You said the word children. At what point is that not her child anymore and that is an adult and she needs to back off?
Well, I have to be very careful because my mother-in-law is probably watching.
Okay.
But what I will say is that I think, you hit it right on the nail. At some point, a parent does have to acknowledge that their child is no longer a child and that they are an adult. And so part of this growing up in this developmental stage is that we're shifting relationships. So we're renegotiating our relationships. And so a parent and a child have to change into now they're two adults. And so you have to respect me just like I'm going to respect you. So there's always that parent-child relationship, but at the same time, once the child is older, there does need to be a shift in the relationship.
Let's take another look at another clip from the play. This is their official trailer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mama Joyce, are you glad he's out there doing this thing?
I'm happy he's working.
Oh my God.
No, I'm saying I'm happy that he has his company and working. Well, yeah, I'm being honest. I'm happy.
Wow, that was them actually on V103. That was a clip of them, which kind of gives you an idea of how her mother feels about Todd. Okay, they said, "Are you glad that Todd is working?" He now has a production company, and he's working in LA. And they said, "Mama Joyce, how do you feel?" She said, "Well, I'm glad he's finally working." Now, what does that tell you about her? Is she being dominant over Candy? Is that any of her business? Should Candy even be talking to her mom about that?
Yes and no. So I'll say it this way. I think that, once again, it goes back to her mother really wants for Candy to be protected and financially secure. And so if we think about this kind of traditionally, when we think about how women would marry off to their husbands, then their husbands will assume that responsibility for them. Now we're no longer living in those days and ages. Women are powerhouse couples. They lead families financially. And so things are a bit different, but I think there's still a lot of people who buy into that old notion that this man is supposed to take care of you. This man is supposed to provide for you. And if you cannot, then you're not a man. And so I think part of what I've noticed about Candy's story on, of course, Real Housewives of Atlanta is that there was this notion around, well, you make more money than he does. And how is that going to work?
Well, should that be a problem? I know many women in this town that make more money than their mates.
I don't think it should be a problem. I think for some people it still is an ideal. And so I think that people have to move past that because we're no longer living in the older ages. We're post the Industrial Revolution. So now women are leading, actually. If you think about financial stability, women make more money than men in many different ways. For example, I'm a professor at Mercer University. There are far more women with PhDs than there are men with PhDs. And then once we add the other context of, race, then it gets exacerbated. So we have to get past the idea that the man has to be the provider. What about how do we work together? And why is that anyone else's business? So I do speak to that. I do think that in some ways her mother could be perceived allegedly as
so nice,
intrusive.
Dr. Moore, because we're not saying any words like she needs to be quiet, she needs to back out.
Well, Dr. Moore, I'll give it to you straight now.
Okay, let's take a look at another clip here. And
but what do you want?
Really?
What would you like to drive?
It doesn't matter.
You want a Toyota?
No.
I'll get a Honda. Let me tell you, I went and looked at a Honda, and she told me, "Mama, you can't be getting no Honda."
Now, Candy, you
That's
said
right.
that.
Mama's.
Yeah, Candy.
Did you say it? Did you
Didn't
say
say
it?
it. Yeah.
Did you say it?
I don't even want it. You know
did
what?
you say it? Didn't you say
I don't
it?
remember
Didn't you say
that.
it?
No,
but-
yes, you did. I was at the
Please
Honda
look at
deal. I
Candy's
said,
face.
Ken, I was looking
That's
at a
right,
Honda.
Candy.
But guess what? If I'm paying for it, it's not like I told her to spend any money of her
Right,
money.
right.
And
I
let's
don't know,
be
Candy.
clear,
You just-
I haven't
Now,
bought.
that showed a relationship between Candy and her mother. You can tell that they grew up very close. And do you think that's part of it? Because especially in single family homes, you are super close to your mother. And as we saw in one of the opening credits, Mom worked herself to death. She might have worked 2 or 3 jobs to get you where you're going. And she feels like she got something to say even after you turn 18 years old. Do you think that's part of it, is that we grow up so close and then relationships change?
Absolutely. I think when you are a product of a single parent family, there is going to be a close relationship between that child and that parent. And one of the things that's so interesting about Candy's story is that, you have to think about the context. So yes, the mother worked very, very hard. She worked multiple jobs to support Candy, take care of Candy and her brother. Okay? And so you have to think also that over the years, her brother passed away. And so all there is left is Candy and then Candy's daughter. And so if you think about it, there's going to be a need, a desire, an internal instinct to want to protect Candy and to want to maintain those close bonds. And so if you think about involving someone else into a relationship, that is renegotiating the relationship. So now someone else is a part of this relationship. So I may not be as important as I once was before.
Okay, we're going to talk about that when we come back. And now we'll take your calls, 706-569-9390. We're taking your calls. And if you have questions about how to navigate a relationship, it may not be your mother or your mother-in-law. It might be your sister or your sister's husband that's trying to get all up in your business. How do you keep the family together and not let that sort of thing tear you down? We'll be right back after this.
Now I don't have to question where you were last night.
Thank you so much for staying with us this Labor Day. I hope there is much love in your relationships. And we are taking phone calls, 706-569-9390, because we're talking with Dr. Darren Moore from Mercer University, a relationship expert. And we're playing with the theme of the Candy Burris play that's at the River Center this Thursday and Friday. And some of you will be going with me because you're going to win some tickets. But we're actually trying to answer some questions also about relationships. Now, we talked about how it can happen, but Dr. Moore, regardless of how it happens, it can tear up a family, can't it?
Absolutely.
There is a chance that Candy's mother, Joyce, if she continues to express herself, and because of their relationship between Candy and her mother, Candy allows her to express herself.
Absolutely.
Todd could say, you know what, see ya.
And he will. And he will, if that continues. I do think that Candy's in the middle. So she's trying to balance her loyalty, her obligation to her mother, the person that raised her, as well as to her new mate. And so she's in a very awkward position, a very difficult position to be in. However, it brings up this idea of, well, who do you formulate your allegiance to? Well, you're now married now.
Right.
So that's a whole different dynamic. And so there's a part of that in my personal and professional perspective is that now you're married. And so now you need to speak to that. And you need to protect your relationship with your husband.
With your husband. We have Paul on the phone. It's interesting that we have a male calling first today. Good afternoon, Paul. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dee. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, let me ask you this. Are you the Todd in the relationship where you're being criticized by a mother-in-law? Or do you have a good mother-in-law? Or if you're not married, do you have a good future mother-in-law?
I'm more of a Candy in the situation, I think. Right now, I have a good relationship with both my parents, and my fiance doesn't get along with my mother-in-law. She thinks she's too pushy and too controlling. I was wondering if the doctor could help me out with that. I don't really know how to tell them to back off because I don't want to take sides or anything like that. But I feel like I'm going to have to take sides pretty soon, and I don't know whose side I'm going to take.
Wow. Now, let me ask you this. Now, I'm trying to come maybe from a traditional, maybe even a biblical point of view. Do you walk away from mom and dad and now your wife becomes first?
I believe so.
Okay.
I definitely believe so.
Okay. So Paul is going to, if his mother can't get along with his wife, and I guess if neither one of them is really a bad guy, but they don't like each other, he's going to have to side with his wife?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily about siding. I think it's about how do we address the issue.
Okay.
So from my perspective as a therapist, what I do is I work a lot with couples and families. And so part of this is working with the couple to think about this process before you get married, if that's the trajectory you're on.
So if you see this before you get married, it's only probably going to be intensified.
Absolutely.
Because now, whereas you didn't see them very often, you're going to see them all the time.
Hopefully that's the plan, or it could be the opposite, where you or your spouse don't go to holidays, you don't go to graduation celebrations, you don't do Christmas or birthdays, and there's a disconnect and there's an isolation that can happen within a relationship. And so it is important for couples, if they're thinking that this could be an issue, to address these issues beforehand. And I think that's part of, if you're thinking about even with Kandi Burruss, they did see a therapist. I don't know how effective it was because they didn't call me to come on the show. But what I will say is that it is important to sit down and have a conversation with wife or future wife and mother and say,
are people in the South, because in the South we think we're so strong that we handle our own problems. Are we more likely these days to go get some help and see a therapist, or do people still think that that's?
I think we're more likely to go see a therapist now. I think it is changing. The perception of therapy, the stigma associated to therapy is changing. But I would say historically that was not the case. And we try to deal with things either through the church or in our own families.
Wow. Now, in speaking with some of your clients, and I know that you can't release any names, let me get Carolyn first, because sometimes they call Dr. Moore and they're at work and they shouldn't be on the phone. So let me let Carolyn get her. Okay. Good afternoon, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm fine, Dee. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. What is your question or your comment for Dr. Moore?
Well, my comment is that I'm going through a similar situation with my daughter. She just got married to a guy here in Columbus, and we're from New Jersey. And we are having a little problem here because I don't understand his situation, and my daughter is more giving, and I just don't want her to be in a relationship.
Well, that's a
I don't know. I don't get good vibes from him.
So when mom there's something about him I don't like, what would you say to her?
I think it's definitely okay and appropriate for you to voice your opinion, but then you voice your opinion and you let it go. I think part of what's important is, as a parent, you need to trust yourself and trust that you raised your child to do the things that they need to do. And so if you raised your child according to, how you think things should be, then you have to let them grow and develop and make their own mistakes.
Now, Carolyn, let me ask you this before you go. Are you willing to let her live her life and maybe just rescue her if he's abusive?
Yes, I am. I just want the best for her. I really do. I just want the best.
It's hard, though, as a mother, isn't it? Oh, gosh, yes, it's hard when they fall in love with someone. My oldest son, the first thing we said, you're going into the military, don't fall in love with the first. And what did he do? I'm like, she's not the one. And he married her, So it's very difficult, very difficult. Thank you so much for calling. We're going to let those calls kind of switch over there. Then we're going to take a call from Jake. Very good information. And I'm glad that society is more open these days to getting some help and saying, I can go outside of the family, to get some counseling. Jake, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dee.
Jake, we've got a whole 1 minute. I am so sorry, but you go ahead. And let's. What's your question or comment?
Well, my comment is, when a man and a woman get married, they become one, and they have to take their life and go forward with it. If they need advice, go to the pastor. If they need anything other than advice, you go to your parents and let them tell you what what the things that in their life that help them over that hump. But don't go jumping into their marriage unless there's abuse in there. Don't go jumping into their marriage, destroy their marriage, because they might be together forever. They might be together for a year. You never know.
Well, thank you so much for calling. Any final words before we go to the break?
I think you're 100% right.
Excellent, excellent. We'll be right back after the break. Dr. Darren Moore on the Dee Armstrong Show. We'll be right back.